Good morning. I'm Brad DeLong, and this is my morning coffee. This morning, I'm actually drinking iced tea rather than coffee. But I'm not going to change the name of the series. Today, Martin Wolf of the Financial Times tells us that we should all go read Barry Bosworth and Susan Collins from the Brookings Institution, who are writing about comparative economic growth in China and India since the early 1990s. China and India are 38% of the human race today. With the other countries nearby that are caught up in their economies and dependent on their growth, they approach close to 50% of the entire mass of humanity. The industrial revolutions currently taking place in China and India, well, those are the most important things to happen in the world economy in terms of changing the world distribution of wealth since the rise of the United States at the end of the 19th century. And the industrial revolutions currently taking place in China and India are among the most heartening and glorious things to have seen in quite a long time. They bring the world markedly closer to being a utopia, to creating a truly human world. There are many good reasons to believe that the strong rates of economic growth we have seen in China and India over the past decade and a half are likely to continue. Neither China nor India is having any problem mobilizing resources for investment. Gross domestic fixed investment at China at 43%, gross domestic investment in India at something like 30% of GDP. Very healthy investment rates, an excellent ability to put capital in place. Output per worker in both China and India has been glorious, although more glorious in China. An 8.5% per year rate of growth in output per worker in China, according to Bosworth and Collins, since 1993. A 4.6% per year growth rate of output per worker in India. In both countries, half of this growth appears to be due to capital deepening, and half appears to be due to total factor productivity growth. Of course, the fact that it's half in both cases makes you somewhat suspicious that these two are much more tightly linked than the standard growth accounting methodology Bosworth and Collins adopt suggests. And there's still plenty of space to transfer additional labor out of relatively low productivity agricultural occupations into high productivity capital-intensive industrial and service occupations. China's labor force, 47% of it is still on the farm. India's labor force, 57% of it is still on the farm. The other bright spot for both China and India is that by now they are both well over the hump of the demographic transition. Rapid population growth pressing on resources is not going to be a problem in either country, or at least not going to be more of a problem than it is today in either country over the next half century or so. Defects and drawbacks? Well, there are three big ones. In India, illiteracy is still an enormous problem. In India, infrastructure is still an enormous problem. Relatively corrupt and bureaucratic governments left over from the Nehru dynasty license Raj, there's still a substantial blockage to growth in India. In China, the big blockages to future economic growth are political. The fact that the Chinese regime is, in a deep sense, fundamentally illegitimate is a significant problem. China will either have to figure out a way to acquire a legitimate government peacefully in a way that does not disrupt economic growth over the long term, or else Chinese economic growth will be at hazard of a catastrophic setback and possibly of a bloody civil war for as far into the future as we can foresee. If these three difficulties, educational in India, the efficiency of the public sector and its ability to provide infrastructure in India, and the big one, political in China, if these three difficulties can be overcome, then there is no reason why we can't look forward to a truly remarkable half-century of economic growth in both China and India. There is plenty of headroom, completely plenty of headroom. China at the moment has maybe a quarter of U.S. levels of GDP per worker. India has maybe 1/7. There is lots of room to grow, and to grow very rapidly. I'm Brad DeLong. and I'm supposed to be drinking my morning coffee.